Well, yesterday in my video on the El Paso shooting, I mentioned that the two shootings might be connected in some way, and that the second one might be inspired by the first. And at the time, I had thought, well, maybe this was another, white nationalist guy who decided to, sort of activate and, screw the optics and go in himself and take out a few people. But of course, and I also had mentioned in that video that I thought that Antifa retaliation attacks would be inevitable, because I think that the Antifa folks are getting fed up with all of the right-wingers, and that while Antifa has, staged, their types of people, not that they're a cohesive group, of course, that the Antifa types, the leftists, have staged a few violent attacks. They've mostly fallen flat. They haven't been able to kill anybody in their attempted, mass casualty attacks, whether it's been bombings or the shootings. But it turns out that the Dayton shooter was in fact a leftist, and he did seem to be inspired to some degree by the El Paso shooter. I would say that this was a bit of a retaliation act by this leftist. He was sort of getting back at the El Paso shooter by shooting these people in Dayton. Though, of course, since both of these guys are kind of nuts, I don't quite understand the logic or how he was getting back at them. But I do think that that's probably what he was thinking, and we can deduce this based on the last tweet that he liked on Twitter. His Twitter account was, I think, called like Flowers of Atomsk or something. And he liked a tweet which was responding to Jack Posobiec, who of course is a internet Republican guys. And the tweet that he liked said, hey, who's ready to crush these guys into dust? And it was in response to Jack saying something about, how we need a better mental health system or something to prevent the shooters. And he also tweeted other things in the past saying that he wanted to, inflict violence upon right-wingers, and, well, here he is, he finally carried it out. Of course, we have no way of actually knowing how many of the people that the shooter killed in Dayton were, right-wingers or anything. But again, he could have gone maybe to a country bar or something and thought, oh, it's a country bar, this must be all conservative, so I'm going to kill him. But nonetheless, I think that the thesis outlined by myself and others of the warming cold civil war seems to be intact. You are seeing escalating violence, and as I had expected, you see political violence only begets more political violence from the other side. You kind of see a series of tit for tats. Of course, we're not quite at that stage yet, because I still think that the right-wingers have been more effective in their violence. Now, of course, that's not to say that this is yet a mass movement amongst the right or the left. These are still you're still getting the fringe people in the movements, not just on the fringes of the movements, if that makes sense. In the other words, you're getting people who already seem to have some kind of mental problems. Not that they're insane, but that they're troubled. And you can tell just by looking at these two shooters. The El Paso shooter and the Dayton shooter, ironically, look like very similar people. They're both kind of, skinny, pale white boys with glasses. Or actually, perhaps it was the El Paso shooter didn't have glasses, and I'm thinking of the Garlic Festival shooter. But anyway, all three of them look pretty similar. And I don't think that is by any means a coincidence. I think that your young white men are the ones who are the most prone to engaging in this sort of political violence, and that's not because white men are genetically predisposed to engaging in political violence or something. It's not like white men are terrorists waiting to happen, as many in the mainstream media, pundits, folks that I've seen online would like to, and of course your left-wing blogosphere types, as they'd like to imply. That doesn't seem to be the case. No, rather, I diagnose this a little differently. I think that it's because these young white men have been sort of beat down for most of their lives, because and called racist and privileged, and said that essentially everything that they do is wrong, and that if they have a happy life, well, then it's only at the expense of black people or something like that. That a lot of these guys are probably don't feel too good about themselves. They have low self-esteem. So congratulations, leftists. You've accomplished that much. But because these guys have low self-esteem, they don't feel validated by their own existence. They don't feel like them being happy and achieving things that they want is in and of itself a good thing. They feel like they have to have validation from other people to say, okay, Whitey, you're one of the good ones. And so therefore they have to latch on to some broader movement like this and make their life count for something. Because obviously, in their opinion, if they're willing to, sacrifice their lives, which is what you do when you become a shooter, because your life is over after that. You're not going to be able to ever be successful or live as a free man again. It's essentially suicide, even if you don't kill yourself. I mean, these guys think that martyrdom is their only salvation. In the case of the El Paso shooter, this guy probably did not feel too good about himself, but he thought, hey, at least I can give my life trying to save the white race. And likewise, this kid in Dayton thought to himself, hey, I may be a worthless white, POS, but hey, at least I can give my life trying to, fight the fascists or something like that. And the sickest part about all this is that these kids their feelings were not in and of themselves unusual or out of the ordinary or against the norm. This is how the left wants white men to feel. And that, of course, in and of itself might seem harmless at the time, just having a bunch of white men feeling bad and down about themselves. But you create opportunities for those people who feel like that they are literally worthless to try and feel some kind of worth out of their life. You've devalued them to such an extent that they feel like they have to do something radical in order to truly have lived, for their life to have had meaning. And that's why the people who are always the most dangerous are those who feel like they have nothing to lose. When your life has so little meaning, you want to do something big that will give it a lot of meaning. Whether that's for the better or for the worse, I think the lines become start to blend. And that's why I think we're seeing a similar profile of terrorists, even though they have very different ideologies, whether that guy is a jihadi or a left-wing terrorist like this guy who wants to bring on the communist revolution, or whether he's a some kind of a nativist white nationalist type like the guy in El Paso. I'm not a psychologist by any means, but this just, I don't think it takes a genius to put the pieces together here. Because I think that these young white men growing up who are skinny and don't have a lot of friends and might not have close family ties have quite a bit in common with the kinds of men in the Middle East who become jihadis. These are men who have grown up during the war on terror, many of whose family have been killed, as a part of collateral damage, essentially, in airstrikes and things. They're lonely. They don't have much going for them. They don't really have a future. And they feel trapped, and they want their life to have some meaning, because all they've known really is despair for their entire lives. And so therefore they get wooed by the words of men like Ayman al-Zawahiri and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Cult leaders for decades, centuries, millennia even, have employed the same strategy when trying to recruit people. If you look at the Manson family, who did Charles Manson recruit to help him commit his spree of murders? He tried to go after young women who have run away from home, some of the most vulnerable people in the country. Now, as of yet, I've not seen anyone address this problem in our society. The problem of young people who really have no sense of meaning in their life. And this is really a global problem with folks in sort of in my age group in the 18 to 30 range right now. You're seeing suicide rates among young people skyrocket all over the world, including the United States. And this domestic terrorism stuff is related to that. So there's symptoms of the same problem. And, other than Republicans just using the phrase mental health, which doesn't mean anything, I haven't heard anyone address this. And so therefore, as long as this continues, which I see no reason why it would stop, this epidemic of people who feel meaningless, who don't have any real close family ties or ties to religion, I think that we will continue to see these terror acts continue, whether or not the Democrats are successful in their banning of guns, or whether the Republicans are successful in institutionalizing homeless people in sanitariums. Now, as for tomorrow, I still have some more to say on the broader political implications of these shootings, so stay tuned for that. And if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.